welcome to Dialogue. The 6th plenary session of the 19th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China has wrapped up in Beijing. The 4-day meeting summarized the major achievements of the CPC's 100-year history and also deliberated what is viewed by many as another landmark resolution. According to China's largest newspaper, The People's Daily, the resolution answers two key questions. Why were we successful in the past, and how can we continue to succeed in the future? And to help shed light on this resolution and the answers to these questions, I'm now joined by Professor Xia Lu, Associate Professor at the School of Marxism Studies at Renmin University of China, and Professor Joseph Gregory Mahoney, Professor of Politics at East China Normal University. And in the second half, I'll be joined by Zun Ahmed Khan, Research Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization. That is our topic. I'm Li Qiuyuan. So let's talk about this. Professor Xia, let me start with you. General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, Xi Jinping, delivered a work report on behalf of the Politburo of the CPC Central Committee and explained a draft resolution on the major achievements and historical experience at the CPC's 100 years of endeavors, and that resolution has now been adopted. What were some of the highlights to you? What's your key takeaways?
Thank you, Qiuyuan. In my opinion, actually, I also just received the text, the scripture of this resolution, and I just quickly read through this resolution. I couldn't help but find that one of the important contribution or one of the important highlights in this resolution is that the resolution highlights the Xi Jinping thought on the socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new era as the new jump, as the kind of forward jump. Compared with the Mao Zedong thought as the first jump in the process of the signification of Marxism. That's the first one. And the second one is that when we read the text, we find that the CPC or the resolution actually focused on the contribution of the leadership after the 18th National Congress since 2012. And that would be my observation at the first glance.
Some of the key phrases or keywords we've noticed is that achievements and historical experiences. Professor Mahoney, what kind of achievement experiences from the past 100 years have been particularly important for the party that it feels that it needs to apply it to the future to continue to lead the country and its people?
Well, you know, one of the key principles in a Marxist worldview is the necessity of historicizing. You need to know where you came from, how you reached your current position, and you need to know this in order to articulate goals for the future and to implement effective policies to reach those goals. So, you know, I think in this context, we have known that this is coming for several years. On the one hand, because it's been clearly signaled by the leadership that we are in a new era, and this requires a new assessment. But also, having reached the 100th anniversary, having achieved the Xiaokang Shihui, the moderately prosperous society, and now the onward trajectory of goals in 2035 and 2049, where China is expected to move forward towards common prosperity and a fully developed modern socialist nation. So I think that what we're seeing is all the achievements that have tracked along the way, including increased confidence and in the political path and the development path, given both the success that we've seen in terms of improved security, improved well-being, the elimination of extreme poverty, and so on.
You know, this resolution adopted at this meeting has been labeled as a landmark one, and only 2 resolutions in the past 100 years has enjoyed such a name, one in 1945 and one in 1981. Professor Xia, these 3 resolutions I mentioned, they answer to different questions corresponding with the time, of course, but what do they have in common in terms of their significance?
Well, yes, these 3 resolutions are all kind of important party history document, and we call it this kind of the most important, one of the 2 of the most important, or 3 of the most important documents in the party history. In that, it describes how history of the CPC should be written. and how or what kind of experience of the CPC should be generalized, and what kind of lessons and what kind of experiences could be kind of put forward in the future's kind of endeavors. So in my opinion, I would like to argue that the kind of common attributes or common kind of characteristics of these three documents are that they focused more on the experience of the CPC, which was or which is and which will be always combine the Marxist or the Leninist principle with Chinese characteristic or with Chinese reality and the Chinese tradition with Chinese constant changing situation. For example, when this year's resolution describes the contribution of Chairman Mao, it described that Chairman Mao always, thought or always considered Chinese reality and put Chinese reality as a priority when, made the strategy and made the kind of the policy, not only in revolutionary area, but also in the socialist construction area. And also when describing Deng Xiaoping and other reform-minded leaders' contribution in the reform process, it also highlights their combination of China's reality, China's condition, and China's kind of what do we have and what we haven't have with our future perspective. So always combine the Chinese reality and the Marxist-Leninist principle would be the most important experience of the CPC's process. And these three documents focused on this kind of experience, and that would be the first common. And then the second common attributes would be that they always look forward to the future. Well, they are not dwelling on the past. They talked about the past, of course, but they are looking forward to the future, and they have very kind of bright perspective in the future. So I would like to argue that these are the two common characteristics of these three documents.
And the concept of common prosperity has been given a lot of weight recently, right, by President Xi Jinping. And Professor Xia, the president has set a deadline of 2035 to achieve that goal, basically correcting the income inequality and providing people with more equal access to basic services. But do you think the resolution provided a detailed guideline on achieving that and how to achieve that?
Well, yes, actually, not only in this year's, not only in today's resolution, but also in other documents in this year, previous kind of months or other kind of years. Well, Chinese Communist Party, the CPC, ever since the 18th National Congress, 19th National Congress, the CPC focused on a people-centered approach or people-centered development idea or philosophy to promote or to advocate this kind of a development strategy. If we could argue that the first 4 decades of the reform period in China would be to speed up the economy, then next phase or next stage of the reform era would be to give the people, to benefit the people, to make the people feel that they could be benefit from this reform. So let them share this kind of prosperity. So that would be the key word of common prosperity. And I would like to argue that in today's resolution, if you ask me whether there would be a detailed policy, then I would like to say that detailed policy should be promulgated in next year or next stage. But the spirit, the philosophy, the people-centered philosophy actually is highlighted repeatedly in this year's or in today's resolution.
And Professor Mahoney, how are you looking at this strategy, common prosperity, as the president has labeled it as the goal for the next stage of development for China?
Well, you're right that 2035 is a key milestone, but the real date I think that we're seeing associated with common prosperity as a broad-based achievement is the second 100, sometime around 2050, 2049, and I think that what we're seeing, in part positive expression from Beijing, but also responding to some of the negative responses that we've seen or characterizations that we've seen in the Western media, that this is not a radical egalitarianism, it's not a radical socialism that aims to reduce everyone to some common poverty, but rather is aiming to lift people up. And to do this, it includes more balancing, creating a better social welfare system, social safety net, social benefits, improved regulations and rule of law, More equitable taxation has been mentioned. I think there's a very strong desire to reform the property markets to make housing more accessible and affordable. We've seen the elimination of extreme poverty, but there will be ongoing efforts to alleviate poverty across the board. And again, the emphasis on green development, the green philosophy, this is something that deals with the commons, right? The environmental commons that affects the health and well-being of everyone. And so I think this emphasis is also something that is contributing significantly to common prosperity, not just in China, but globally.
Another topic that we are closely watching is the possibility of personnel reshuffle in the leadership. The CPC will hold its 20th National Party Congress in 2022, right? So Professor Xia, according to your experience, will we see any institutional changes or personnel changes?
Well, in terms of personal changes, I would like to argue that this would be a mystery until the last minute, right? But in terms of the institutional change or institutional innovation, well, I would also like to argue that actually the CPC is always innovating, is always reforming its institution. And that's why we call the CPC is a learning party, is a learning kind of learning-oriented political party. We call it because it does not necessarily mean that each and every party member of the 95 million party member is learning or kind of learning the context of something, because this part not that it is, but that the party itself is learning, it's always adapting, it's always kind of changing itself to the real situation, to the reality. So I would say that the innovation of the institution or institutional change happens every day, but not necessarily every day, but it happens constantly. And also, if we remember correctly, in 2018, in March 2018, there was a kind of a significant institutional change and institutional innovation in terms of political leadership and the state organs. And I would like to say that that time's innovation or the innovation or reform back then laid down the principle or laid down the foundation for the future's leadership. And in today's resolution, we also noticed that the CPC actually describes that ever since the 18th National Congress, the institution has been always improved and innovated so that the party's leadership could be enhanced, and party's leadership could be fulfilled, and party's organizational ability could be fulfilled, and the party's, let's say, mobilization, the effectiveness of the mobilization could also be fulfilled. And that would be the result of institutional change. And in the future, it will be continued. That's my take.
So it's always adapting to changes, always innovating itself. Also talk to us, Professor Xiao, about this intra-party democracy, right? This meeting is viewed as demonstrating intra-party democracy, which is seen as the life of the party. Help us understand the concept and how it plays out in practice.
Well, this intra-party democracy, when we talk about intra-party democracy, we should also mention intra-party supervision, intra-party, let's say, self-purification, the self-improvement and self, let's say, innovation. All these kind of concepts are combined into this intra-party democracy, because intra-party democracy would not, it's not necessarily talking about voting or election or term limits to other kind of party official or party cadre. It is a kind of a new dynamism or a new mechanism for this party to take on the new stage, take on the new mission of the second centenary goal, because it should incorporate as much as possible, as much energy as possible, as much good elements as possible. So this intra-democracy would be a way, a channel to do things.
One more question before I let you go, Professor Xia, on the issue of Taiwan. This important meeting comes at a time when we're seeing mountain tensions across the Taiwan Strait. Was there anything mentioned on Taiwan? What was the message there that you're getting? In today's kind of resolution, we noticed that the CPC also highlights
the contribution of the party to the national unity, and also the national reunification. It does not necessarily mention what should be done in details in terms of Taiwan policy, but it has mentioned that in the previous years, what happened in Hong Kong and what happened in Macau, well, we have seen this, we have witnessed this, and we have observed this. It has happened, or it has been a significant change in terms of institutional innovation, in terms of how to improve the governance of Hong Kong's kind of SAR government, and how to improve the benefits of ordinary people of Hong Kong and Macau. So I would like to argue that these policies and these measures taken in Hong Kong and Macau would be kind of a good model, or a good kind of let's say model for the future kind of policy that would be applied in Taiwan. It would be my personal take on this issue.
Thank you very much, Professor Xia. And let me also get your take on this, Professor Mahoney. What's your read on the issue of Taiwan, the response from the party regarding to this?
You know, I think that what we've seen from Beijing is consistency on the Taiwan issue, despite the inconsistency we've seen from other players in international affairs, most notably the United States and increasingly Japan and Australia when it comes to affairs in the Pacific Rim. So I think that, though, that as Professor Xia noted, the experiences in Hong Kong were highlighted, but as well as the determination to continue to stand firm against secessionist and Taiwanese independence efforts.
And a lot of news outlets in the United States and Europe, they are calling the Sixth Plenum, saying that this is a meeting that'll set the tone for a new era for China. Do you agree with that? If so, what kind of tone is the meeting setting for the country?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that we're seeing right now, and you know, part of the context of this, of course, is the announcement that we've just seen that from COP26, where the United States and China, despite all the nastiness that we've seen coming out of Washington over the last several years towards Beijing, but this determination to cooperate more on emissions reductions, and this has excited a lot of people. But I think that a lot of people are very interested in China's commitment towards green development, its ongoing efforts with COVID recovery, the positive model it's set with its zero COVID policies. And this is something that I hear some people in Germany right now are really trying to promote as the surge is underway in Germany, and 100,000 lives are at risk. A lot of people are interested in supply chain and logistics concerns, peace and security, again, U.S.-China relations, as well as you know, the broader issue of greater equity in China, poverty alleviation, income inequality, minority affairs, but as well as you know, greater equity internationally, which we've seen recently with CIIE, as well as Beijing's commitment to true multilateralism, better trade balances, and sharing the benefits of development with others.
Yeah, speaking of multilateralism, on the diplomatic front, you know, a lot of China watchers think that China-U.S. tensions or rivalry or this East-West ideological difference will intensify in the future. What do you think is the best way for China's leadership to deal with this?
Well, I think that what the Chinese leadership is doing is the best. I think taking a very firm stand, not allowing China to be bullied, improving security and military preparedness, but at the same time promoting peace, multilateralism, pushing back against American unilateralism, whether it's coming just direct from Washington or where the U.S. is trying to reestablish hegemony over international organizations. All of these things are clear messages and consistencies that we're seeing from Beijing.
Now we are getting words that June Ahmed Khan is joining us live via Skype. Good to see you there, June. So let's talk about this plenary session of the party, right? This one is set to be exceptionally important because it comes at a time when the party celebrates its 100-year anniversary. It also comes at a time right before another important political season in a couple of months. So all eyes would be watching the resolutions passed at the meeting. What are you particularly watching for?
So I think I'll really try to be very brief in wrapping up my thoughts on this. First of all, what I'm trying to notice and understand is China's overall posture. How China, we've seen in 40 years how remarkably China has developed. The scale, scope, and speed of China's achievements has left the world really it's something unprecedented. So what I'm trying to understand is how that was possible. As someone living in Beijing and traveling around China for 6 years, now I'm trying to understand what makes this synergy possible. And what I notice in this resolution is the key, really, which is that, first of all, we need to study our past, understand our history, understand what made success possible. And what I see is that it's really a story of constant reflection, constant correction, being pragmatic. Secondly, and most importantly, and what we see in China, if you travel around, you see people's experience, you see the success stories, China's government, the communist.
Well, it looks like we're having some technical difficulty there with our connection with Zoom. But let me bring you back to this, Professor Mahoney. Many people believe that this meeting could not only determine the fate of the country, but also would have ripple effects beyond its borders. What do you think? What kind of issues or areas are the international community mostly concerned with?
Well, I was mentioning some of these before. You know, green development is clearly a topic that's very prevalent right now with COP26 and concerns that we haven't done enough globally to reduce emissions, and in fact that we're still moving in the wrong direction. So this issue, and again, seeing this new resolution from or commitment from China and the U.S. to work together to cooperate on emissions reduction, to continue to see efforts to recover from COVID, to keep up production and keep the supply chain and logistics moving forward. To try to maintain peace and security, especially in the Taiwan Strait. All of these are key issues and driving issues in the global consciousness right now. And I think you know, what we're seeing is an increased sensitivity, as we've seen for several years now, but it's still growing, where more and more people are paying very close attention to what's happening in Beijing and how China is responding and moving forward.
And June is now back with us. June, this question is to you. You know, Bloomberg reports mentioning that business owners and investors, especially those in chip making, coal and real estate industries, they have been paying very close attention to the discussions at the plenum. What kind of message are being sent out about future policy making in these industries, do you think?
Okay, I think for now, what we've noticed, I wish I was the perfect person to respond to this question, but let me first start with overall businesses, especially investors from the US and EU, which are supposedly regions, basically, that seem to be, there seems to be some kind of trade war, so to speak. But these investors are investing more in China. They see that the Chinese market is reliable, the government's messaging is stable, and this is exactly what investors are looking for. So in major sectors, we see that there's enhanced interest and confidence in the Chinese market. But that said, in the specific sectors that you mentioned, we've seen recent developments being covered in a very sensational way as well. We still have to observe in these sectors what are the consequences going to be. Of course, China has very ambitious goals, and there's absolutely no doubt that China can reach those goals of 2030 and 2060. China is firmly advocating green development, and that's mentioned repeatedly in this resolution as well. So maybe in certain sectors there will be a change that maybe green development is more encouraged. But for real estate, of course, the Chinese society is developing really fast. We see incomes and we see cities emerging. We see, and another thing that I really want to mention is that I recently traveled to some smaller counties and cities, and I saw that now the governments are attracting talent and people by saying that they will have a good quality of life. The focus of developing new cities is also so people-centric, so nurturing, so sustainable. Happiness is a major factor, because the truth is that happy people are creative, and creativity is what we need to really address the challenges of the world that we live in, which is so uncertain. So I think in any case, these major sectors may have to observe for a bit longer. China is still a very stable and a huge market, and the government is constantly ensuring stability and proper messaging, something rare in today's time. And I'll also add this, that as someone who's living here, I really feel the significance of long-term planning, having a vision, having a philosophy to guide the government and the people is just so very important. But at the same time, we see that there are very specific manifestations of that policy. Every city, every village, every county is trying to find creatively its way forward, following the major vision. So we are living in exciting times. Also, some would say uncertain times. But I think in Chinese as well, a challenge is also an opportunity. And this is the opportunity that China is trying to grasp. Through the Belt and Road, through multilateral efforts of China, we can expect that the global community can also think along more pragmatic, sustainable lines instead of zero-sum and alliances. Well, so it's something the world should watch, and let's see what opportunities we can make together as a global community.
Pretty good tracking record of mobilizing resources, meeting its goals, seeing through its plans, no doubt about that. And in recent months, several important global meetings have been held, such as the UN Biodiversity Conference and the UN Climate Change Conference, where the Chinese president made key commitments, right? Professor Mahoney, what do his remarks at these international occasions tell you about the position of the CPC and China on these global issues?
Right. Well, to reemphasize, Xi Jinping has talked about the desire to promote true multilateralism, not a, again, a pseudo multilateralism where one country exerts a hegemonic position, whether it's in international organizations or through the international economy or through military affairs. And I think that, this principle has been expounded for many years with the goal of promoting a multipolar world, as well as peace and security, not in engaging or trying to undermine the internal affairs of other countries and so forth and so on. So I think that what we're seeing as China moves forward with its efforts in the Belt Road Initiative, its contributions to the Paris Agreement, which were highlighted with COP26, as well as CIIE and many other efforts, this consistency in message and tone.
Zoom, your thoughts on this?
Yes, my thoughts on this, I think one thing we need to appreciate about China is, first of all, the principle of mutual respect, equality. No one is superior over the other. Everyone has a unique experience and something to offer. And the fact that through all of these achievements, this document is about taking China forward, a modern socialist country, but it doesn't say China will be #1, better than anyone else. It's really a path. It's a path of improving step by step. And I think this is something that I truly appreciate about Chinese communication. It's about nurturing, uniting, not dividing, and also the Kunming Declaration, for instance, helping developing countries with major challenges that China has overcome today, helping them find their path. This is the kind of leadership that we need in today's world. So that will be my closing note.
And we appreciate your perspectives and insight. Thank you very much. That's all the time we have for now. That's June Ahmed Khan joining us live from Shanghai, and Professor Joseph Gregory Mahoney joining us live from Memphis, the U.S. That does it for this edition of Dialogue. Thank you so much for your time. Bye for now.